Hi, I'm Dr. Dan Rubin, here with Ad Hoc with the Doc, and I'm here again with my associate, Dr. Amy Waite, and we're going to talk today about high blood pressure. Because, Dr. Waite, there has been new guidelines released, and I think it's kind of about time, right? The new guidelines basically say that they've lowered the threshold for calling somebody or quantifying them as hypertensive. Talk to us a little bit about it. We don't have to dig really into the details because the details, if anybody wants to look at them, are accessible online, but it basically says what?
So the new guidelines that were released last week say that 130 over 80, higher than 130 over higher than 80, you're considered hypertensive now, that you have high blood pressure.
And so before, there were different guidelines. There was a different threshold.
Right, your blood pressure could be a lot higher without being considered hypertensive.
So what do you think about that?
I think it's good. I think it creates awareness. Hypertension is known as the silent killer. People don't know that they have hypertension until they go to their doctor, and their doctor, takes their blood pressure and tells them. But it's the silent killer. You don't really have signs or symptoms early on.
Sure. So cardiovascular disease is the leading cause of death worldwide.
Leading cause worldwide, yeah.
And so having high blood pressure can put you at risk for like a stroke. What about a heart attack?
Stroke, heart attack, it's the leading cause of kidney disease. It can cause all kinds of health issues.
So this is a really big issue. So I think it's a really good sign of responsibility by the AMA that shows that they are taking this more seriously. We want the primary care docs are on the front lines. They're the ones that are really going to be looking at this. We do know that in various grocery stores or say pharmacies or there are blood pressure machines where somebody could go in and have their blood pressure taken, and they themselves can see if their blood pressure is higher than 130 over higher than 80.
Yes.
So the systolic over the diastolic. And it used to be, you said 140 over 90, which was considered stage 1 hypertension, which I believe is now considered stage 2 hypertension. So the old stage, the new stage 1 is a drop. That's great, especially for us naturopathic doctors, because we so often talk to people about modifications that they can make, because blood pressure is a big deal. So if somebody is found to have a higher than 130 over higher than 80, what do you they should then go to the doctor if they just did this, say, in a Walgreens or a CVS or something like that. But what if somebody's approaching that? What are some of the things that people can do today if they aren't doing them already, if they're at risk for high blood pressure, if they have a family history of it, if they've been told that they have high blood pressure? What are some of the things that they could start on?
So, first of all, they need to check their blood pressure when they're not in a stress state. So a lot of times people come to the doctor and they get what's called white coat syndrome. They get nervous, and then that's when usually doctors take their blood pressure. That's not an adequate reading. That's not accurate. So getting the patient into a calm state before you take their blood pressure is a good idea. Having them deep breathe for 5 minutes before you take their blood pressure again to see if it's still high can tell you a lot about that patient and whether or not it really is true hypertension.
In the clinic?
In the clinic.
Okay.
I usually will take blood pressure about 15 minutes into my visit when I think the patient has relaxed a little bit. And if it's still high, I have them lay down, deep breathe for 5 minutes just to see how much their sympathetic nervous system or their fight or flight response is playing into that. Because oftentimes that is a huge component of it. But
I know a lot of times blood pressures are taken sort of immediately or shortly thereafter upon arrival to the clinic. And maybe somebody's been stressed out, they couldn't find a parking space, or traffic was problematic, they may have been on a call or have just gotten off a call. So that's really great here, because I know at times too, if people have had high blood pressure, we'll have them maybe take smell some lavender oil too, which helps relax them. I love to hear that you do that.
I do. There's a lot of things you can do to try to find the cause. And while you're doing that, you can show your patients that teaching them how to get into that parasympathetic or more calm state of mind has beneficial effects to their overall health.
And that is something that they can do today.
Stress
reduction and stress management is such an important tool that, frankly, a lot of busy Americans just don't have time to even add on to their schedule. Even a 5-minute relaxation breathing technique. And I know a lot of the smartwatches out today, which a lot of people have those on their wrist, or a lot of the phones have apps that if you just engage the app or set the timer, it takes you through breathing exercises. So that's something that they can do today.
They can do today
Wonderful.
to start lowering their blood pressure.
What about dietary interventions?
So there's a lot of kind of confusing things if you look up dietary interventions that you can do for high blood pressure. What I find is a lot of patients are worried about sodium. I think it's a lot more than just sodium. Table salt typically contains 98% sodium chloride, whereas a sea salt contains other trace minerals like potassium to counteract the sodium in the body. Sodium draws water in, it raises blood pressure, and so decreasing sodium in diet is a good thing, but I think that even switching to a sea salt is more realistic for patients. Also incorporating magnesium, potassium, other minerals in their diet is a good thing. Our soil is so depleted nowadays of minerals. It used to be, farmers would replenish the soil with 60 different minerals before they would replant crops.
Interesting.
Since that's our only source of minerals is from the soil, if they're not replenishing those minerals, everybody's going to be deficient. And so now they replenish about 6 minerals because they know that the plants only need about 6 to grow.
Of course.
And so all of us therefore are deficient in minerals, and that mineral deficiency or mineral imbalance raises your blood pressure.
So folks out there, that precludes that somebody's actually eating plants and not just meat or things that are fresh like salads or like fruits. And I would assume that some of these fruits and vegetables would have to be organic. I don't know if organic is in the guidelines. But when you say sea salt, there's actually products out there that are called sea salt. I know there's a Himalayan type sea salt and there's just a general sea salt. I know in our lunchroom we have sea salt. And so a lot of people really crave that salty taste. So for people out there who are a little bit worried about maybe making the switch, will they still have that same sort of salty taste but then be getting the added benefits of the minerals that our body so needs?
It does. A lot of people actually prefer the sea salt to the regular Morton's table salt. Even chefs now are starting to use
so you can cook
sea
with
salt
it
because of the taste. And I would be careful. Just make sure that your salt is unprocessed. That when you process salt, it removes the healthy trace minerals. And so I personally like Himalayan sea salt, but just make sure that your salt is unfiltered, unprocessed.
Okay. And some people, I heard you kind of say that may need other minerals in pill form or some other type of supplemental form, or potentially adding trace minerals to their water. I know you've recommended that to a lot of patients that we see together. So wonderful. And those minerals work in concert with each other?
They do. So we often hear that, sodium and potassium need to counteract one another, but even magnesium, so part of hypertension too, and part of what we do is identify the cause. It's really important to identify why the patient has hypertension. But one thing I look at is it a constriction of the blood vessels? If the blood vessels are constricted, that could be stress. When we're in a stress state, our vessels constrict.
We sort of tense up like
tighten up, and so do our blood vessels. Tighten up to redirect blood flow to where we need it to respond to that stressful situation. But also if you don't have enough, say, magnesium, those vessels, arteries, are surrounded by a thin layer of muscle. Those muscles need to relax, and magnesium is required to allow those blood vessels to relax.
I mean, we do a lot of nutritional testing in our practice, and quite honestly, there's people who are frankly low in magnesium. It's a hard one to absorb, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think too, our soil, our food, it's so depleted. I think that everybody needs to supplement.
Got it. And
or even a Epsom salt bath at night.
Now, magnesium is rich, I know, in green leafies, green plants. It's also, I believe, pretty high in chocolate. So sometimes we advocate for some pretty dark organic chocolate, not necessarily the milk chocolates, but we know that chocolate is also high in antioxidants. And we also know that coffee's high in antioxidants. And coffee's gotten some good press lately. But what about caffeine intake and how it relates to high blood pressure?
So there are some studies out there that are still trying to find out if caffeine creates long-term hypertension. It does definitely constrict the vessels and causes short-term hypertension. That is definite. But most people do sip on caffeine all day long, so that will create a sustained high blood pressure. Whether or not it creates a long-term high blood pressure, that's they don't know yet.
So I think it would be helpful for the audience what it means to constrict the blood vessels. So if you have a blood vessel that is open and at its normal opened, like how it's normally open, then the heart has an easy time pumping blood through that blood vessel.
Yes.
But what happens when the blood vessel becomes more tight, more constricted?
So if you're thinking of, I kind of explain this to my patients, your vessels are kind of like a garden hose.
Okay.
And you have a pump at the end of that hose. And if that hose gets constricted, it's going to damage that pump. If the pump is trying to push against pressure, it's going to cause damage to the heart. It also does cause damage to the inner lining of the vessels, which can create a lot of damage as well. I do men's health, and oftentimes men find out they have high blood pressure because they start having erectile problems.
Okay.
Those blood vessels are damaged. The inner lining of the blood vessels are damaged. They can't dilate as well as they used to, and that's an early warning sign that men have high blood pressure, and that's a common cause of erectile dysfunction.
So given the vessel constriction, etc., how does exercise play into this, or does it?
It does, definitely. Definitely exercising. It's recommended you exercise 3 to 4 times a week, 30 to 90 minutes a day. And patients that have high blood pressure should start, slower, not doing anything too strenuous at first, but definitely will lower blood pressure.
Okay, now hey, let's back up. Most people, frankly, don't exercise. Just like trying to add 5 to 10 minutes of deep breathing or meditation or just being calm, that's hard for people to fit into their schedule. And now we're asking people to exercise between 30 and 90 minutes, 3 to 4 times a week to lower blood pressure. But hey, it's a trade-off because most people don't want to die. And so I think we know exercising helps so many different things. Right?
And there's so many different forms of exercise that you can do. You don't need to, go to a gym and, there's so many things that you can do. You can go for a hike. You can go on a walk at night. You can do so many different things. You can go with your friend. You can do things that are peaceful. Some people even join a gym. They get on a treadmill and watch a show. So that way they're catching up with their TV, or maybe they're reading a magazine. You had mentioned that people who are diagnosed with hypertension, or maybe people who are just getting into an exercise program, probably don't want to start too vigorously or too strenuously. What would be an example of like a strenuous workout, like a high-intensity interval training or super strength pumping iron? I'm thinking of a certain patient that had hypertension. His doctor told him to exercise, and he trained for a marathon.
Okay.
He did have a heart attack. And so...
He didn't have a heart attack prior to or during?
No, he did have a heart attack during his trainings. Okay. It was too much for him to go his whole life without exercising and then all of a sudden want to run a marathon. You should start out slow and gradually build.
Right. Especially if somebody has high blood pressure and perhaps having some of those damaged blood vessels, which is really difficult to diagnose, so there's sort of an assumption, then pumping all that blood against those damaged vessels might be problematic.
Right.
So what we talk about in our clinic here are what are things that we can do today, what are things that we can do tomorrow, and what are things that you really need physician supervision for. And it's sounding like if somebody has hypertension or has a family history, that they should probably talk to a physician like you about what's safe, how to engage, how to eat. And so you do that a lot in practice. I've seen you engage and help people through their diet, eliminating certain things, and putting them on some exercise regimens.
I do, and I think the main reason to see a doctor if you're diagnosed with hypertension or you diagnosed yourself with it, went to Walgreens and ran your blood pressure, is to find the cause. So I have patients that have been prescribed, let's say, a beta blocker or ACE inhibitor, and they didn't realize that their antidepressant was the thing that was causing their high blood pressure. So now they're on another medication to control the side effect of their antidepressant. So finding the cause, I think, is number one. Find the cause and then address that cause. Whether it's nutrient deficiency, is it diet, is it the fact you're overweight, is it lifestyle? Do you need help managing stress? Stress coping capabilities. There's so many things that need to be looked at before taking the medication.
I have two last questions for you. Number one, what about one of America's favorite foods to eat, which seems to be high fructose corn syrup, sweeteners, the processed sweeteners, and then lastly, something that most of us don't do enough is sleep. Do those play a role in high blood pressure?
They do. High blood sugar is linked to high blood pressure. So high fructose corn syrup is the main thing that raises blood sugar in our typical American diet. So eliminating high fructose corn syrup is a great way to lower your blood sugar, therefore lowering your blood pressure. And then sleep deprivation has been linked to hypertension. So anyone that has less than 6 hours of sleep typically has higher blood pressure readings.
So Dr. Waite, when we're talking about hypertension, we're talking about basically things that appear simple, but for some people could be actually very challenging, that they can do literally starting today. I could eliminate, or somebody could eliminate high fructose corn syrup 100% from their diet and still find foods to eat that do taste good and that are good for you. Might be a little more challenging for people to engage in 3 to 4 times a week, 30 to 90 minutes, but at least they could get a start. People could start to add minerals to their diet. They could eat more plants. So it sounds like these are pretty simple steps. So I think it's been great. Any last thoughts on hypertension and the new guidelines and things that people could do today, tomorrow, or see a doctor for?
I mean, just try to get healthy all around. It's more than just one thing. It's your body's way of telling you that something is wrong. So figure it out sooner than later, and you shouldn't have any problems.
I assume if somebody's in a factory and there's a pressure-sensitive machine, and it usually has a dial, and if it starts to get into the red zone, you're going to call a service person, right? Because that machine could blow. And what I hear you saying is that the human body is thusly as well.
Right.
Wonderful. Well, for Ad Hoc with the Doc, this is Drs. Rubin and Waite, and thank you.
Thanks.